Welcome back, everyone, to our new episode of The Quad. And with me, virtually today, Vivian Berkovich, who was the ambassador of Canada to Israel, prominent lawyer, activist, and has her own podcast, The State of Tel Aviv, and my good friend Ashira Solomon, who is a political commentator and moderator, and just came back from a very exciting trip. And this week, unfortunately, Emily Schrader is also going around the world doing incredible advocacy work for the State of Israel and won't be with us, but we're all here in Israel, but virtually with you today. So, ladies, we have a very mixed week to unpack. We also didn't meet last week, so there's a lot going on that we need to talk about. Firstly, I was on a trip to Spain and the UK, and as I was landing, it was the eve of Holocaust Remembrance Day, International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And just as I landed, I opened my phone and I saw, it was last Friday, and I saw the decision of the ICJ. And so at the beginning, I was kind of excited in the sense that it seemed to me that essentially they did not prevent us from being able to defend ourselves against Hamas terrorists, and the accusation of genocide, which was a warped, of course, completely baseless accusation on Israel, didn't really hold. And so I thought to myself, well, on the eve of Holocaust Remembrance Day, and I tweeted this, maybe the world learned something. But subsequently, when you look into the details, it's not amazing news. It's not terrible, but it's not amazing news. So I want to unpack that. Vivian, as an international lawyer, what is your take on that decision? What do you think it means? Was it good? Was it bad? Or was it a mixed bag?
Totally mixed bag. And it was so mixed. I mean, to use a North American hockey metaphor, it was a classic ragging the puck. It was kind of what everyone involved on the Israeli side hoped for and expected, which was to say nothing, but say a lot. What did they do? In effect, they said, well, our jurisdiction allows us to decide, is there the possibility that a genocide has taken place? And based on the evidence we've heard, yes, there is a possibility. So all we have to do today is decide, can this go forward to a full hearing with full evidence and presentations and arguments? They answered that yes. So on the one hand, we're not saying genocide did not occur or did occur. We're just meeting the minimal judicial threshold we need to say this case can go forward. We're not going to throw it out right away.
They could have put an injunction on Israel, essentially.
So that would be
the war.
They could. There are two extremes that they could have, two extreme decisions or paths they could have taken. One was, yes, to say, you know what, we think that the likelihood of genocide occurring is so real that you have to stop what you're doing now. You cannot engage militarily anymore because you're just coming too close. The other extreme, which is what Israel asked for, was throw the case out. No merit. So they're not going to take either side in that regard. And what they did was they said, kind of, we're going to do on the one hand, on the other hand, but Israel, within 30 days, you're coming back and you're going to give us a full report and explain our concerns, which we have with respect to incitement by political leaders to genocide or allegations of incitement by political leaders to genocide. And we also want you to really focus on enhancing the access of humanitarian aid trucks into the Gaza Strip. So full report, 30 days from now, chop, chop.
But Vivian, isn't it going to take years now, like literally years, to get to the next stage of this case?
Yes.
Which hopefully by then the war will be over.
Yeah, it's going to get bogged down in process. And, somebody's doing another interview this week and it was like, but so then in 30 days, what happens? I said, not much. They take the bench takes the report, they read it. And then I'm sure South Africa will have whatever, I don't know what their procedure laws are or rules, will have X time to reply. I mean, legal process is very cumbersome. It takes a long time. And what this court has indicated is they're gonna kind of do as little as possible for as long as possible.
But maybe then it is a good result. If we're looking at who actually the ICJ is, they're essentially the legal arm of the UN. And we know how biased the UN is against us. Ashira, were you surprised? Are you still confused? Where were you when you got the verdict?
I'm so confused, and I'm so happy that I have two lawyers here on the show, because I'm like, what is going on, and how much power does this court have? And Vivian, when you say it's going to take years, what does that mean? 5 years, 10 years, 3 years?
Years. I mean, I think that probably I would say if it's going to see the end of the tunnel, we're going to take this case through to fruition. It's unprecedented in many ways. So we can't look in. There have been a few genocide-related cases, very, very different facts and geopolitical circumstances, but I just totally throwing off the cuff, I would say 3 to 5 years. But that, it's time. No one wants this case, other than South Africa and Qatar and Iran, wants this case to be heard.
What happens if they rule against Israel? What is the implication for us?
You mean in 5 years from now?
Yeah, 5 years from now.
I would be much less focused on that and interim rulings that they have the jurisdiction to make in the meantime. So, there could be coming out of this report, and depending on how the government conducts itself over the next few months, there could be an interim ruling saying, you know what, you can't do X. I mean, they have tremendous power to make interim rulings with respect to if and how we engage in Gaza. Now, there are people who say, well, it doesn't matter what they say. We don't actually have to abide by their ruling. They have no enforcement power, which is true. But then Israel runs a very strong risk of becoming an international pariah.
Exactly. We could end up like Russia, for simply defending ourselves from a war we didn't start because of these types of rulings or boycotts, or if America decides not to pull their weight behind us for one reason or another at the UN. But hopefully it won't get to that. And hopefully we can, decisively win this war and perhaps bring a new reality in Gaza, and people will just want this whole thing to go away. I mean, I'm still so shocked that South Africa, with its human rights record, could actually do this. I think it's very dangerous for many different countries, this precedent.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's, to quote an American congresswoman, it's all about the Benjamins in the end.
All about the Benjamins. Well, we shall wait and see, and hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll have different experts come in and weigh in on exactly what happened, what implications, and how this case continues. And we'll come back to that. Okay, let's talk about another wonderful UN surrogate called UNRWA, the United Nations Refugee and Workers Association. And they are actually finally under fire. We've made them our scumbag. We've spoken about their chief executives. We have been talking about UNRWA for a while now. And finally, because they found that 15 or 17 UNRWA staff members, actually on the UN UNRWA payroll, were involved in October 7th, the whole world's going nuts, even though people have been telling them for years. The rot, the bias, the corruption, the obsession with essentially destroying the state of Israel, which is the right of return. And I was very impressed to see my good friends, Hila Neuer, who's been fighting this for many years of UN Watch, and also my friend Marcus Sheff from Impact SE, who actually, it's a non-profit organization analyzing school books around the world, but specifically in the Palestinian Authority. I was very proud on how they presented the case.
They do great.
They really did great work, and I've been collaborating with them on this for a while, because ironically in Jerusalem, and we've spoken about this before, they have the same school books in some of the 85% of the kids in East Jerusalem schools. So my question is, and the cynics will say, well, it's a pause. Could this bring down UNRWA as we know it, as an entity? Will people finally say, well, why do the Palestinians need their own refugee organization that perpetuates the status instead of solving the refugee problem? Ashira, do you think this is the end of UNRWA?
I'm really hoping so. I'm hoping that they are dissolved. But with that being said, I'm wondering, well, what's going to replace it? Is it going to be something better? What is that going to look like? Are we still going to have the same education curriculum happening in Gaza and East Jerusalem? So I have more questions, but the hope is that it will be dissolved and that these countries will not just pause funding, but they would suspend it completely.
Well, I have to say, Trump also froze funding, and then President Biden renewed the funding, and now he's paused it. But this is evidence that they've had for years and years and years. And you've also got the United Nations Commission on the Refugees, and they serve all the other countries on refugees, and they seem to do a much more professional job. Vivian, where do you think this is going? Do we have any hope of this very rotten organization being dismantled?
Yeah, I'm going to be a wretched cynic today on this one. And there's something weird about all of this. There's not really much new that's come up. Hillel's been beating this drum for a long time since his life's work. And he exposed the Telegram group as well. It had over 3,000 Hamas supporters, and they also happened to be UNRWA teachers and maybe had other jobs. So it's just kind of weird to me that we have 12 UNRWA employees exposed and all of a sudden the house of cards comes crashing down. No. And let me tell you why I say no. It's very clear that the Biden administration is highly motivated, as is the UK, to tie some kind of outcome of this war to a Palestinian state, whether it's demilitarized or not, and the declaration of that. And I'm convinced that they're going to tie the dismantling of UNRWA to the creation of that state. And let me also add some really important context, because, you know, it was really made my head spin. Yep, it's Trudeau time. When Canada was second or third, I mean, Canada has been under Harper, and I served under Harper. We ended UNRWA funding.
Yes, that's right. Harper also ended.
And then Justin couldn't wait to bring it back in, and he didn't. And we're one of the largest funders in the world. And we were like second or third, even before Germany, to announce, oh, Canada's pausing temporarily. It's additional funding. So that was part of the emergency drive.
So they didn't pause the regular funding.
Newsflash. What's coming out, and we're working on it slowly, but it looks like here's what happened. Canada couldn't wait to make the emergency funding payment, and I'm working on this with some other people. It seems that it was paid in advance, in full, and it wasn't due until April. So the question is whether or not that payment was made before or after the announcement. And the other thing is, a few days ago, one of the ministers in Trudeau's government announced an additional $40 million of funding to other groups operating on a humanitarian basis in the Gaza Strip. Well, and those groups are UNICEF and World Food Program. Fact, they don't have any operational capability on the ground.
No, they don't.
So where exactly is the money going? And is there some kind of subcontract? Yes, with UNRWA to deliver aid. So there's a lot of kind of funky business behind the scenes, and I'm sure Canada's not the only one. So I agree. I just don't see it at face value.
Well, speaking to experts, I agree. They said, Fleur, they haven't cancelled it. They're not disbanding it. They're pausing, because when you have that type of evidence in your face, what else are you going to do if you keep trying to push Israel into a two-state solution with people who want to kill us and have blatantly said they don't want a two-state solution?
And the question also, of course, has always been, and why do we have separate organization just for Palestinian refugees? Why are they not?
You speak to Einat Welf, who's written a book about it, and she'll tell you it's because the purpose of UNRWA was never the resettlement of refugees, was the end of Israel. We're just holding on here until you can go back, and that's really their ethos, their philosophy, their raison d'etre. And I think she's right on that, actually. And she's also done fantastic work, so I want to give her a shout out.
Amazing. But she's right on that, and she's also it's become the raison d'etre in many ways for the UN.
The UN
is obsessed with UNRWA. So there's a lot of stuff in this bag of snakes.
There really is. It really is a bag of snakes, isn't it? I'm really exhausted. It's like you have to fight the very institutions that are supposed to be there to protect you. It's really exhausting, and I just I want to see our hostages home so we can move on to another chapter of this terrible, horrible, terrible experience that the Jewish people in Israel are going through. So now I think we should talk about something a little bit more positive. And Ashira, you weren't with us for the last couple of weeks because you were on a very important national mission. Please tell us a little bit about New York, the Black Jewish Caucus? What happened? How you see the whole thing?
Yeah, so I went to New York. Speaking of the UN, Ambassador Erdogan, he partnered with Black Jews from Israel to create this event, to create a Black Leaders Roundtable event, to bring Black Jews from Israel living here on the ground and Black American leaders, Christians, Muslims, together in one room to talk about what is going on in the Black community and the relationship with the Jewish community. So it was a private roundtable. It was super impactful. Of course, we went through just hours of history trying to understand how do we get where we are today.
Ashira, where are we? You say how we get where we are. Where are we in terms of the relationship?
We're not in the MLK days anymore, right? Where Black and Jews were, together fighting for civil rights, where we had Jewish people at the Selma protests and the marches with us, where they're, hiding in churches together, organizing. We're not there. We're completely separated. And so what we were trying to really pinpoint is, are Black people just anti-Semitic? Are they just misinformed? Is it a combination of both? What is happening? So, we had to unpack that. This has been a targeted effort with the Arabs, this alliance with the Black and Arab alliance, starting with Yasser Arafat, targeting the Black Panther movement, targeting people like Angela Davis and Sophie Carmichael, and all of these things on how to break down the Black and Jewish relationship that was once so strong. So now that we know the history, we're saying, okay, well, how do we move forward? It's really hard to, we're in an election year. It's really hard to just, break down years and years and years of propaganda and misinformation. Black people feel that the Palestinians, because they're brown, have a proximity to Blackness. They feel that American Jews have a proximity to whiteness. And they feel that proximity to whiteness, because they associate, the American Jew with a white person, and we have all these problems with Black and white people, that now they're all lumped into that category.
So the Jews basically get into the white privilege basket,
exactly,
which is the ethos of woke and Black Lives Matter, etc.
Everything that we talked about. And then we also talked about, well, how did the American Jew get there, right? Like, American Jews started to assimilate. They started to leave the economic hand that they had in the Black community. They started to, fight to be considered as white. They didn't want to check a Jewish box anymore. They wanted to check the white box. So we're trying to talk about how this issue is complex on all sides. However, what came out of the meeting is that we're going to do more events like this, and we're going on tour. So we're going to do boots on the grounds at HBCUs, taking Black delegations of Black Jews, Black Christians, and getting in the face of these Black students to really have them engage with the Jewish community and letting them know, Jews aren't white, but also that shouldn't matter anyways, because your allyship shouldn't go to a community because of their proximity to your color. That makes no sense. But also just really being able to debate, saying, what are you guys thinking? Like, what information do you have? Where are they misinformed? And I really want to give a shout out to Ambassador Erdogan, because he has launched this foundation that he wants to do diplomacy in the Black community. He wants to connect and build with Black American leaders. And right now, there's no relationship as far as the Israeli consulate in Atlanta that really have relationships with Black leaders. So there's such a disconnect because no one's talking to them. So he's really putting forth a strong diplomatic hand in this area. And I'm so excited to see what's going to come out of this. And I'm excited that, listen, I love what I do. I love that I get to speak. I love that I get to, go viral on Instagram. But I think that we need to bring the human connection back. We need to see each other. We need to talk face to face, and not just me be a talking head, and they see me rant on a video. They need to have this interaction and bring this closeness, bring Israel to them, to their doors, and explain to them, listen, you're really on the wrong side of history, and here's why.
Vivian, you want to ask a question?
A lot of questions. A few comments too. Not quite sure where to begin. I'm going to make an overarching comment, which is, just kind of, I got to come clean here with people out there who don't know me, but I do have some self-awareness. I loathe identity culture. And I really don't react well, because what I hear is us kind of playing into what identity culture has served up. And I'm an iconoclast at the best of times, but right now when it comes to this, and so, you have this particular initiative in America led by Ambassador Ardern, great. Every country is going to have its permutation of identity politics playing out in a negative and very twisted way. And what I don't think is productive is playing into it. So you made a comment early on, for example, about the Jewish and Black communities being quite divided and separated. And that may be, but that's not new. There were a lot of, freedom riders and all kinds of people in the 60s who were engaged in, the civil rights movement. There are a lot who weren't. And I think that the way in which Black-Jewish relations in America have evolved, whatever your perspective is very complex. I don't think that I think there have been many campaigns to divide and conquer. Maybe Yasser Arafat and various allies in the UN and elsewhere in the Arab world have been engaged in one approach. I would give huge credit to Spike Lee, for example, and others of his ilk. I would give huge credit to Jesse Jackson, to Louis Farrakhan, to Malcolm X. And I don't think they were taking direction from Yasser Arafat. They may have found common cause, but they weren't taking direction.
But wasn't it the Islamic element that turned them?
Yes and no. I mean, Jesse Jackson wasn't Islamic. So and I would give the Black community, with the greatest respect, full agency for the decisions that they have made. And I would say the same for the Jewish community. And they're both very complex, not monolithic communities. And I just bristle when I hear us playing into and or responding to what this crap from critical race theory has served up, which is, you as a Black Jew, you go do outreach, but it shouldn't be because you're a Black Jew. It should be based on your ideas. We grew up in my generation, which was, a while ago, and this was the outcome of the civil rights movement. We were taught, and I believe this is the way to go, to not judge a person on the color of their skin or the way their eyes are slanted, but to really look inside and see the person. And I'm sticking with it. I think that's the right way to go. I hate identity politics.
I think that in an ideal world, you're right. But the problem is that this is what we got. What do we do?
Just to clarify, I'm not being sent because I'm a Black Jew. I'm being sent because I care about Black people. I care about what's happening in the political world among Black people. I happen to be Jewish. And now when the worlds are colliding, I feel that I have a responsibility to say, hey, Black people, I can speak to them because I'm from the culture. I understand their language. I understand the lingo, and I want to talk to them. It's not about the identity politics of, this person should have a position just because of the color of their skin, and all.
Well, I was responding not to you.
There is a cultural awareness that I have that maybe you don't have, that I have to go and I need to speak to them. Who else are we going to send?
Okay, well, you're kind of contradicting yourself there in my view. I mean, my comments were directed at what you set out as the scope of the initiative. Get Black Jews, Black people to go speak to Black communities and try to sort of figure out what's going on. And now you're saying
no one's been engaging with the Black community. So yeah, we're taking it upon ourselves because we're saying there's no engagement there. I mean, it's quite ridiculous. No one at the Israeli consulate could get one Black leader there. All the Black leaders that we got there were from our own context. No one had connection. So there's no diplomacy happening. So what do you say we do? We can't do it because we're Black. We do it because we're Black. We're feeding in.
No, that's not. So let me respond.
No, I want to jump in here and say
we're marching with Palestinian flags. Like, I mean, it is what it is.
No, listen, I speak Spanish and I do a lot of outreach with Latinos in the United States because I speak their language. Now, it's culturally, Ashira will speak a different language to different audiences that she's with, but it's something that unfortunately, I'm not, in an ideal world, we should all be able to advocate for everybody.
Yeah,
but unfortunately, in the world we live in, that's a reality we live in.
Ashkenazi representation, Mizrahi representation, because I think that's important that you see all faces of the Jewish community. So the next one,
can I respond, please?
I'm just saying, like, I don't. What would you like us to do?
So first of all, I was commenting on the initiative that you presented as an initiative for Black people, Black Jews, to go and speak to the Black community. And I'm not sure why that should be such an exasperating comment. I don't have any, I wasn't commenting on you individually, but since you bring it up, I hope that you're in the mix, not because you're Black, but because you're capable and because you have something to contribute to the discussion. That's my view. And I would, let me please finish.
When we had our
finish.
Go ahead.
Please let me finish. And I would also like to think that if, Fleur or me or blonde-haired Emily fit the bill, that we might also be included. Once you start dividing and conquering, I think you've lost. I want to bring up a different example, just kind of move away from the Black thing in America, because it's so loaded for so many reasons, and just take it up, give you the same issue in a different context. The Jewish community in Canada and the Israeli representatives in Canada don't do outreach to huge chunks of the population that they should. For example, Persians. We have a huge Persian community. They're not all in LA. I think Canada may have a larger one actually than America in terms of raw numbers. We have a huge Hindu population in Canada that is very supportive of Israel. That's Indians. We have First Nations communities. I could go on and on and on. And what I would prefer to do is, you have to understand the community to which you're doing outreach, but I'm not going to go looking around for Persian Jews to go talk to Persian Canadians. No, I think that's wrong-headed and backfires. I just feel so strongly that for us to accept those terms of engagement is
sorry.
wrong.
That's just not going to work in the Black community. It's just not. First of all, the way that Black people think in general, like you're missing the cultural piece of it. They're not even. It's not even about us. It's about who we're talking to. The Black people in general, they're not going to accept what you have to say because of what you look like and who you are. That's
unfortunately, Vivian, it's the reality.
Very unfortunate. It's the reality. If you go to down south in Georgia, or if you go to Alabama and we send Emily down there to talk about Black issues, they're not going to listen to her. That's unfortunate. Every community doesn't work like that, though. The Persian community may very well welcome Emily with the blonde hair. I'm saying for the Black community,
Emily's making an example of you. Yeah.
But in fact, Emily is very close to the Persian community.
No, you know what I'm saying? So I'm just saying that the piece that you're missing is you don't understand how Black people think. And if Black people don't see a Black face, they're not going to accept it. And that's the reality.
I think I can understand and process what you just said pretty easily, Ashira. Yeah. What I am saying is I find it objectionable in the extreme. And if that's...
Yes, but what do you do if that's if that's how the culture wants to receive? What do you do?
The fact that shouldn't be the case, you're right, Vivian, but unfortunately that is the case. And so if that is the case, thank God we have enough Black Jews and Black allies that we can send. And that was my next question to you, Ashira.
Well, I just shudder to think that, shudder to think what that means for how we engage with all kinds of groups in the world, including
maybe not all kinds of groups is the same.
I don't understand what you don't understand what I'm saying. I'm saying that Black culture, Black American culture is not going to receive you well. So what do you do? I'm not saying that's how I think. I'm saying
it's not about being right. It's about being smart.
I think I understand, but thank you.
I agree with what you're saying, Vivian. But when that whole culture says like, we're not listening to...
They're trying to address a problem. So my question, Ashira, is who was around that table that you were either, surprised, impressed that they show up? What type of people were there? Maybe give us some names that you can mention.
Yeah, so we had Amari Stoudemire there. We had Pastor Dumasani Washington there. We had a woman named Anita Hawkins there. We had Haya Lev there. We had various influencers. We had this woman historian, amazing Stacy Aviva there. So we had a lot of great minds in the room, and it was really nice to see. We had Anita Hawkins. She spoke about how her daughter wrote this long letter in, she's pro-Palestinian. She did not want her mom to go to this event. She said, Mom, if you go to this event, you're supporting genocide. And she wrote a whole letter, and the mom told us what the letter was, and her daughter's 18 years old. And she expressed that this is what her daughter thinks, and she's in university, and she's afraid that this is how, what she believes, and how can we address young people, So we're going to go to historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, because that's where Black students reside, and we're going to go speak to them at their colleges and universities.
Well, I really think it's an incredible idea. I think it is born out of sheer necessity right now. Because, like you said, and you've been saying now for a few weeks, Ashira, unfortunately, they've and a lot of people do this, like in Ireland, they've transplanted the conflict into something that for them to recognize it, they have to, put it as a black-white thing when it shouldn't be. In Ireland, they've taken the Palestinian-Israel conflict and they put it as a Catholic Protestant thing, which it shouldn't be. So people transplant the conflict here to all sorts of very unparalleled situations, because that's the best way that they understand. And unfortunately, you have to fight fire with fire and do what we need to do. And we have some incredible advocates. And on that very interesting and sometimes contentious topic, we move on to our interview of the week, which is also Shira and I did with an incredible advocate for Israel, Xavier Derousseau, who works for Prager University and was in Jerusalem recently. And we had the privilege of sitting down and talking to him about his advocacy work. Over the last few months, we've seen an incredible show of solidarity from friends from all around the world, Christian friends, Jewish friends, people from everywhere. And today, we're very, very privileged to have with us here in the studio Xavier Derousseau, who is a Prager University personality and also an influencer. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your journey, because I know you didn't start off being a fan of Israel or even being a fan of anything going on here in the Middle East. Tell us a little bit about how you got here.
Yes, of course. So I wouldn't say it's that I wasn't a fan of Israel. I was just confused about Israel. I didn't understand it. I heard so many different narratives from both different sides and everything in between. And I was just genuinely curious both about Judaism and just Israel as a nation and its history. So last year at Prager U, I had just started in February, and a lot of the people who work there, including our amazing CEO, Marissa Streit, are Jewish. And the first time she invited me to Shabbat dinner, I was so fascinated by the depth of the tradition and how far it went back. So we just started talking about Israel and everything, and she invited me. So I was like, yeah, it's like, of course, would love to go. So I came here in June and July, just last year, and I was so fascinated by the truth and seeing that I came here looking to see an apartheid state like I heard about, and that was nowhere to be found. It was this beautiful melting pot of culture and acceptance and love and tolerance. And when I posted I was here on Twitter, I got attacked. And this was back in July of last year. And so I started standing up against anti-Semitism, like saying this is strange. And then October 7th happened. And I saw a wave of propaganda like nothing I've ever seen before. And I could not just let this be one of those things where there's 24 hours of outrage and then nothing else happens. So I kept speaking up. I kept standing for Israel, standing for the truth. And I ended up making so many amazing connections and friends here. And I was invited here to come stand in solidarity. And that was such an honor to me to come here. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Xavier. We are thrilled that you're here.
That's amazing. I love that story. I was just speaking a couple of shows ago that the best way for Israel to defend themselves is for people to come here and see that it's not an apartheid state.
Correct.
You said that you weren't necessarily anti-Israel, you weren't necessarily sympathetic. I have this question of, like, in the Black community, is it truly anti-Semitic, or is the community misinformed? What do you think from your perspective?
I think it's deep misinformation that's rooted from propaganda, because a lot of people, especially in America, are just listening to organizations like Black Lives Matter and Antifa. And what my brand and platform has been built on is exposing a lot of the lies that those groups tell. And those groups have notoriously stood not only with the Palestinians, but with Hamas. And they spread these lies. They use the same tools and skill sets of hatred towards people in America as what Hamas is doing here, except Hamas has taken it to the extreme level. So what I think what's happening with Black people is they're not hearing the truth. They're getting their information from TikTok, which is the most colorful propaganda swan.
Yes, this is
So I think people are just very misguided about it, because when you really sit down and you explain it step by step to Black people, I've had the mistake of saying many times this issue is complex. It's really not. There's a lot of depth, there's a lot of information, but it's very simple. Israel is defending itself. Israel wants to stand in peace. Israel wants solidarity, but there are many groups that feel the need to attack Israel because of Israel's heritage and because Israel is standing for democracy here in the Middle East. And when more people learn that, I think more people are going to start waking up.
What type of pushback are you getting for standing with Israel and saying that message?
You know, I don't want to sound like a victim when I say this, but the hatred that I've received is like nothing I've seen before. I get attacked all the time online. I'm used to it. I have thick skin. I am so unbothered. I mind my business and I stay in my peace. And for the last 3 years that I've been speaking out just about all my controversial opinions, I've gotten my backlash, and it's fine. I respect people's passion and what they have to say. But when I stand with Israel and as I continue to fight anti-Semitism, it is a different level of hatred that I'm receiving. For the first time, I had to go to the police department because the threats are getting so specific. I've had to do this deep dive on the internet, contacting every website to take my address down, to take my number down.
You?
Yes, people were doxing me. They were threatening to do protests in front of my building. They were threatening to skin me alive, to disembowel my mother. I was told by one group that they were planning on locating me with their brothers and that they were going to come kill me. And if I showed you my DMs right now, I guarantee you the first 10 are all calling me the most racist, vile things, telling me to unalive myself and to do all these terrible things to myself. And I just look at them and you know what? I prayed for them, because that's hatred in these people's hearts. This is deep-rooted hatred. This is confusion. And this is just, it just shows not, you know, a lot of people try to say it's inhumane, but really it shows how far humanity will go if they are rooted in hatred.
You're 100% right. And Ashira always talks about the fact that what the Palestinians have been very clever to do is kind of take this conflict and superimpose it on Black American civil rights struggle, which is such a different journey of nonviolence with incredible leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King, which the Palestinians wish they had. What do you say to other people in America about the fact that they've turned this into somehow an issue of color, of race, and not what it is, which is essentially a religious or ideological battle?
I call it, to oversimplify it, I call it the bullying umbrella, where they make this huge umbrella and they put all these different things, these different buzzwords, and they categorize it under the same thing. Like if you say that there's only 2 genders, people will say you're transphobic.
Yes.
If you say that Black people aren't victims and that Black people aren't oppressed in America, they'll say that you're racist. And if you say that you stand with Israel and their right to defend themselves, they'll say that you're Islamophobic or that you're supporting apartheid and oppression. It's people utilize language. They're very good with linguistics. They're very talented. And the words that they choose and the things that they say in order to turn you against the people who are trying so hard to live in peace. And, you know, when I try to bring up what Hamas is doing in their strategies and the way that they're kidnapping their own people and putting them in these military bases to try to make the world turn against Israel, it's strategically, it's brilliant, but morally, it is absolutely bankrupt.
And what do they say when you try and tell these people this is what Hamas is doing? Will they hear you? Are they undecided that you're getting to, or are we all preaching to the choir?
You know, it's one of those things where I feel like you can't always immediately change people's minds, but you can plant the seeds that hopefully you'll make them curious enough to research what it is that you're saying. because when you explain it to these people bit by bit, the first thing they'll do is they'll either curse you out or they'll insult you, or they'll call you ugly, or they'll call you the N-word, or they'll say all these just idiotic range of insults. Like, I always say, if you're going to insult me, at least make me laugh. Or say something that's creative.
Yeah, I get so much hatred in some of them. Somebody did a picture of me next to an orangutan, and I saw it and I burst out laughing, and I showed my kids, and they go, "Mommy, why aren't you crying?"
That's funny.
They use the same color hair.
You know, they took a screenshot of me from a video talking about the truth about what ethnic cleansing actually is.
Yeah.
And they screenshotted me, and they pointed to my nostrils, and they're like, "Look, guys, I found the Hamas tunnels."
Oh my goodness. Wow.
But you have to have a laugh, at least when it's a little creative.
Right. I was like, you know what? If they took the time to make a whole meme out of it,
I took the time to make
I
it happen.
respect it. And I take pride in my original Michael Jackson nose. So I have no shame in it. So it's like, you have to laugh. You know, that's something I've learned from Israel, is you have to laugh, you have to dance, you have to pray, you have to hug each other. Because if you allow the hatred to dampen your spirit, then you allow yourself to become weak. And the second you're weak, you're vulnerable. And yes, like you have to at the same time be vulnerable amongst each other, but you can't let the world see that. You have to let the world see you in solidarity. And that's exactly what I've seen in this entire week that I've been here. And I'm so proud to stand in solidarity with the Jewish people.
Okay. So from daily fighting of scumbags and identifying them to our section of Scumbag of the Week. As always, such a plethora to choose from. So please enlighten us, Vivian. Who is your scumbag this week?
So I'm going to bring it back to Israel and Israeli politics for the last little bit of the show. And, you know, I always try to maintain respect no matter who holds the office, but for the actual office of an elected office holder. So I'm going to do scumbag minus, because I don't want to call an office holder. I know, but I think we have to kind of maintain a certain decorum.
Okay.
I appreciate that I've been guilty of this in the past. So my scumbag minus of the week is Itamar Ben-Gvir, who is also our Minister of National Security. 2 days after the International Court of Justice came out with the decision we discussed earlier and said, you know, we're a little concerned about insightful statements from Israeli leaders that, you know, may enhance or cause or contribute to genocide or genocide-like conduct. And Ben-Gvir held what's been referred to as a kind of bar mitzvah party with, you know, a few hundred of his close political friends. And they had great fun talking about how they were going to settle the Gaza Strip. And that is exactly, may not be a genocidal act, but it is exactly the kind of insightful comment that Israel is so in the dock for right now, and especially for the next 30 days. So yes, he's a provocateur and he likes to do things like that, and he's great at it. But, you know, you have to really question the bona fides of someone like that when Israel is in such a precarious position internationally.
And what really bothered me about that conference is the fact that we're trying to get another deal for the hostages, and this flies in the face of that. I was very upset by the conference. Look, you can think, or you can dream, or you can be pro resettling Gaza, but just as we're in, like you say, Vivian, the docket for 30 days, and all they're using, the other side, all of their claim is these statements, because that's all they got. And the Prime Minister's saying no. He's saying we're not resettling Gaza, and these people, including some liquid ministers, are dancing in this conference, making us look bad. And I agree with you.
You dancing too, like anyhow.
Bar mitzvah party.
Yeah.
All right, Ashira, what about you? Who's your scumbag of the week?
On brand with my discussion today, my scumbag of the week is the 1,000 Black pastors that went to Biden and said they call on him to call for a ceasefire. I'm just really disappointed in these pastors that they're calling for a ceasefire. These are men of the cloth. These are clergymen. Why aren't you calling that our hostages come home? Why aren't you calling for life? And then two, I really feel like, why are you guys meddling in a Middle Eastern conflict that you don't know about? And they're also saying, once again, like we've been talking for weeks, that we are the Black church and we will stand with the oppressed. And I'm just thinking, really you want to insert and use your collective power to pressure Biden to have a ceasefire here, but you don't want to use your collective power to address crime rates in Black America. You don't want to use it to address poverty. You don't want to use it to address the literacy rates among Black boys, but all of a sudden you stand with this quote unquote oppressed group over here in the Middle East. I think that they're a joke, and I think that's just ludicrous.
Okay, so that's a Shira Scumbag of the week. You 1,000 pastors that decided to use your power, as Ashira says, for something you know very little about. And my scumbag of the week, you ladies know that I like to pick a scumbag of the week that we have then a happy ending. And this guy's been a scumbag for such a long time, and the happy ending came this week. Roger Waters, who has been a serial anti-Semite, injecting his concerts and his interview with so many tropes against Jews, with so much anti-Israel stuff, so little knowledge, rants, creating coalitions of haters for so many years. And finally, he said something that went too far, and his record label has dropped him. So well done to the record label, and good riddance to Roger Waters. I hope we never hear you ever again singing anywhere. That's my scumbag of the week. And now, ending the show, always on a positive note, with Heroes of the Week. Ashira, starting with you, who's your hero of the week?
My hero of the week is also a pastor. Pastor
The good ones.
Yeah. Pastor Dumasani Washington. He is the founder of the Israel Black Solidarity Organization, and he brings delegations of Black Americans and clergymen from America to Israel, but he also has groups that he brings from South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, Ethiopia, and he brings them, and I love his delegations because he allows them to engage with modern Israel and not just biblical Israel. And he's working really, really hard. I would say he's like the expert in this space of, bridging that gap between the Black and Jewish community and really trying to restore the relationship that once was.
Well, he sounds like a great guy, and I think he's coming soon, so maybe we'll have him on our show very soon. Vivian, who's your hero of the week?
Hero of the week, because I have to pick one, is David Barnea, who is the head of the Mossad, who has been very, very engaged for weeks on the hostage talks to have the last of the Israeli hostages released. I think it's just a horrible no-win job that he seems to be doing with great dedication, and whatever result he brings home will be horrible.
Yeah.
And I just think that, I allow myself to sit and think of what it would be like to be in that person's shoes. It's beyond Solomonic.
Beyond.
Just horrific. And so I just kind of, salute this man who has devoted his life to the state and service and is now, at the end of his career doing the most challenging, difficult, and existential. It's not about survival of these particular hostages, which we all want and desperately want to see them home. It's about the survival of the soul of this country.
Absolutely.
And to carry that responsibility, I just say thank you, David Barnea.
I think it's very, very worthy hero this week. David Barnea, we send him all our strength and all our prayers to be able to do the best deal possible and save as many lives, and hopefully all of them. And on that same theme, my heroes of the week are two mothers of two young women who are still hostages, who I was privileged to meet last week, Simona Strechler and Mandy Damari, Strandbecher, and Mandy Damari. She's Daron's mother and Emily's mother. They're both young women, and I shudder to think they're young, attractive women there in those dungeons. And I met with the mothers, and they gave me strength. It's actually incredible. And they were very seriously concerned because now we're going to 18 weeks. I mean, and this is the conversation we're having, that if their daughters have been raped into pregnancy, we need to get them out now so that we can deal with this now and not in God knows when it's too late. And this was the heart-wrenching conversation that I was having with these two mothers who I don't know how they're standing. And they were so resolute, and they schlepped all the way to Jerusalem to meet me to see how I could be helpful. And of course, I offered them all my help and everything I can. And I'm just in awe of these really strong as steel mothers who are doing everything that they can in anything they can do to try and get those girls out. And so they're my heroes, Simona and Mandy, and I pray with them as we pray every week that next week our hostages will be home. Thank you very much for watching our show.